Hello, I'm Tyler Barnes. I'm a commercial broker that works for West Coast Commercial Realty out here in Seattle. Today I'm going to be walking you through the steps on opening a retail front from step A to Z. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the discovery phase. This is how to find a good commercial broker, the requirements on what you're going to need in order to fill out and move to that leasing phase. So the first aspect that you want to do in finding a commercial broker is you want to find a broker who specializes in your asset class, either that's industrial, multifamily, retail, or office. The reason why you want to do this is because each asset class is drastically different from all the other ones. The market flow is very different. The way that the LOIs are written different, the terminology is different, everything about it is drastically different. So you really want to find a broker who specializes in one space or another. Plenty of brokers will do different types of stuff. I mean, I personally, I've worked with land, I've worked with retail, I've worked with office spaces before, but I like to say I specialize in retail. That is where my skill is. So it's very important to understand that you want to find a broker who specializes in the asset class you're looking for. The next thing that you want to have, before even looking for a space, is important documents. That is business plan, 2 years of P&L statements or profit and loss statements for your current business if you're expanding or finding a new location. And you also want 2 years of your personal tax statements. The reason being is because every single landlord is going to be asking for this stuff because, when you lease out a space, this is a relationship that you're building. It's a relationship that is going to be long-term. And from a landlord's perspective, they want to make sure that they are leasing the space to someone who is sophisticated, who is serious about your business. In entrepreneurship, there's a lot of what I like to call dreamers out there. People who wake up day one, they're like, oh my gosh, let's start a business. But a lot of times they don't put in the boring part, right? They like the fun part about looking for spaces and think about it, strategizing it, but they don't put in the extra work for the boring parts, which can be some of the most important parts, like creating a business plan. Business plan is used by your broker as ammunition for negotiating. If I come by and I'm leasing a space out to Joe Schmo's coffee shop, Joe Schmo has never owned a business before. If I just come into a landlord and say, hey, my tenant is great, they want to lease out the space, and what? The landlord is going to want to know, well, what about them? Who are they? What kind of coffee? What do they bring special that someone like Starbucks or Sally's coffee shop down the street does or does not have? So I use a business plan to show off my client, show that they're serious. Like, look, they have put in the time and effort to draft these business plans, to put in the additional time into this to show how serious they are about the business. They've really methodically planned it out. And then tax statements, every single landlord is going to want these just to make sure that they're not leasing out the space that someone is drastically in debt to. So it's very important to have something like that as well. So the next part that we're going to talk about is the research phase. The research phase is when you sit down with your broker and let them know on what you are looking for. Most importantly, I like my clients to think about not just 2, 3, 5 years, but I want you to think 10, 15 years down the road. Do you need room for expansion? Typically, leases are going to be at least in retail 5 to 10 years. So you want to have a good understanding on how long you want to get your lease. Typically, you can get a better rate and a better deal the longer you go for, and it also shows confidence in your business. Though it is very common to do a 5-year versus a 10. But the most important part is for your broker to research locations, traffic count. How many cars are passing by the street. The amount of monthly rent that you want to pay is also very important. And these are kind of the primary subsets of what you need to look for. And lastly, that I would say is if you are doing something like a restaurant, you need to have a good understanding if you want a hood, either a type 1 or type 2 hood, because this can drastically impact what you're looking for and where. And then next, what we're going to talk about is the touring. Typically, commercial real estate operates Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. No weekends, no holidays. It's just an industry-wide thing. The best thing to do is once your broker sends off spaces to you, and a lot of times there's a lot of space that we send off. And brokers can't be sitting there and calling a bunch of people saying, hey, are you open to this? Hey, are you open to this? Hey, are you open to this? Because sometimes we'll send off 20, 50 listings. So typically when we send off listings, we want clients to look through them, see what they like, cherry pick the ones that they like. Then the brokers reach out to the either landlord or listing broker to A, get the questions answered that the tenant might now have, and B, to figure out if the landlord's open to the use. Not all landlords are going to be open to the same use, and landlords can drastically vary from landlord to landlord to landlord. So once we get a green light or a thumbs up from the landlord, we then will meet up and go out to the space, tour it. I always recommend to my clients to take pictures, videos, whatever else you need. A lot of times to bring a contractor. It's very important to bring a contractor because I, as a broker, I don't mess with permit applications. I don't do any building. I don't do any of that. And so I want to make sure that my clients have a professional that is going to be doing that. A lot of times when tenants lease out spaces, they're going to be building the space out. And when you build out the space, it's going to include getting permits and making sure you can actually do what you want to do in this space. I always recommend to bring out a contractor to the space so they can go through it, let you know like, hey, we can definitely do this, or no, we can't, or yes, we can, but it's going to cost a ton of money. Or are we going to have to put sprinklers into the space? Are we going to have to make the space ADA? How many bathrooms are we going to need? Bringing a contractor is very important, and especially make sure you bring a commercial contractor, not just a residential contractor that is willing to dabble in commercial, because they are drastically different. And just like when you select a broker, you want a commercial broker, not a residential broker who dabbles in commercial. Just because the skill sets are drastically different. Next, we're going to be talking about the negotiation phase. Once we tour a location and you like it, we will then draft up what's called a LOI, or letter of intent. This is basically a non-legal binding document that we use to negotiate on. Once the LOI is agreed upon, we will then copy the information and the terms from the LOI onto a lease. Typically, this is drafted up by the landlord's attorney, or we use what's called a CBA lease, or Commercial Broker Association lease. This is a boilerplate template that is widely used among commercial brokers. It's just kind of a general lease, basically. During negotiation, there's a few things that are kind of key points that are typically negotiated on. Now, I will say in commercial real estate, just about everything is negotiable. Everything. But for the most part, the key components that are negotiated on is the rent amount, how much you're paying per square foot, TI money, the amount of out-of-pocket expenses that the landlord will be paying to build out your space, and rent abatement, how long you want free rent for. Typically, I try to aim for however long my clients think that their build out is going to be. But a lot of times landlords are going to basically say, hey, you're going to get 3 months or until business is open. So if you expect your build out to be 3 months, and we ask for 3 months of rent abatement, but you open your doors and finish it early at month 2, you're probably only going to get up to month 2 if that was the agreed timing. And lastly, the next part that is negotiated is typically going to be the HVAC and how the space is going to be delivered. Is the HVAC system going to be repaired before you move in? Are they going to put it in a new one? Is there one even in the space? If so, who maintains it? Who pays for it? You know, there's a bunch of different ways that the HVAC system can go, but and also bathrooms. Some spaces aren't even stubbed for plumbing or electricity. You know, these are complete empty gray shells or cold shells. And with shells, you want to make sure that there is a clear understanding on how much it's going to cost to do that. Another reason why you want to bring a contractor to the space, because landlords are not always going to be adding the stubbing in there. So lastly is once the LOI is agreed upon, you will get the lease. And the lease sometimes there's a little bit of back and forth. Again, it's primarily the exact same terms that were agreed upon on the LOI, copied over into the lease for with a bunch of legal jargon in there. Now at times there can be minor things that are adjusted, or what we call in the industry redlined, basically things that we negotiate on the lease. Typically this is legal jargon or how things are worded, or maybe insurance amount. There's just very minor things that are typically negotiated on the lease. Because the big components like rent amount, how long the rent abatement is, or the free rent you get, or the TI amount, who take care of what, this stuff is typically already negotiated on the LOI. When it comes to the lease, I always recommend having an attorney look over the lease for you, because the attorneys understand the legal contracts much more. I mean, they're going to be the professionals when it comes to understanding the legal jargon within the lease. And then after that, you can always get the lease notarized if you want. Recently, the laws have changed, at least here in the Seattle area, where leases no longer need to be notarized. Granted, there can be some exceptions on there, but typically I would prefer for leases to be notarized from a landlord's perspective, just to really solidify the legitimacy of the lease. And then once you get your lease signed, well then congratulations, you then get the keys. Sometimes there can be a period where you don't get the keys because we need to wait for another tenant to move out, or you need to do a build out phase, but you still get the keys during the build out phase. So thank you very much. My name is Tyler Barnes. I'm a retail commercial broker from West Coast Commercial Realty. If you need any spaces lease, please contact me. Thank you.